Right now, in your pocket, your phone, or your bank account, there is something you work for, save for, and sometimes worry about more than almost anything else in your life. But if you ask most people to explain what money actually is, they cannot answer. You have probably been told the same story about where money came from. People used to trade things. You had chickens, your neighbor had bread. You traded, and then someone invented money. The problem is that anthropologists spent over 100 years trying to find even one society that actually lived this way, and found nothing. This is where the story gets strange, because money was never just coins. And if you trace this story all the way back to the beginning, something becomes clear. The first money was not money at all. It was a list. And the moment someone started controlling the list, they very quickly started controlling everything else. Imagine a small village 10,000 years ago, where you help your neighbor fix his roof before the rain, and he does not give you coins for helping. He simply owes you. That thought, "You owe me," was the real first money, not a coin, just an agreement between two people about who owes what to whom. But the moment someone starts writing these things down, the ability to tilt the rules appears. And if you look at the entire history of money as one continuous story, it becomes very hard to ignore the pattern. Every coin, every banknote, every banking app is essentially just another attempt to do the same thing a little more cleverly. Remember this moment, because a few thousand years later, this same idea will come back, except this time it will wear a suit and run on computers. The earliest real records of money appeared around 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, and they looked nothing like what you might imagine, because nobody was minting gold coins or opening banks. People were simply sitting and pressing small symbols into wet clay tablets inside temples. Back then, the temple was not a place people came to once a week to pray. It was the bank, the warehouse, and the center of power all at once. Thousands of people received food, goods, and work through it, and the priests sat there recording who owed what to whom. There is one detail that catches the attention. The fine for biting off someone's nose was 60 shekels, roughly 2 months' wages. This shows that they already had a very precise system of value. They knew the price of labor, the price of food, the price of things, and apparently even the price of a human nose. The priests who kept these debt records very quickly started controlling everything else. Soon people would realize that the list could be made far more convenient. And that is when money got a face for the first time. Around 600 BC, a small kingdom called Lydia, located where Turkey is today, invented something that changed almost everything. They made identical pieces of metal and stamped each one with the royal seal, which meant you no longer had to weigh a coin or bite it to test it. You simply looked at the face and trusted it. For the first time in history, money carried the face of a ruler. The moment that face appears on money, the money no longer belongs to whoever is holding it. It belongs to whoever's face is on it. And this gave every king and every emperor one very specific temptation, which not a single one of them ever managed to resist. If Lydia showed that a face on a coin could make millions of people trust a piece of metal, Rome showed how that trust could be used to do things that looked almost like magic. Under Augustus, the silver denarius was nearly pure silver, trusted everywhere from Britain to Syria. Trade was growing, the empire was expanding, and everything looked perfect. Right up until maintaining that enormous empire started costing enormous money. New armies appeared, roads were built, cities grew, wars began. And that is when the emperors discovered something that must have felt almost supernatural at the time. You cannot just create gold, but you can collect old coins through taxes, melt them down, mix in some cheap copper, and stamp the same face on them. And suddenly, you have more money, created from almost nothing. Nero was the first to do it officially. And then, the thing that usually happens when a scheme works, happened. The next emperor thought, well, if he got away with it, so can I. And each one pushed it a little further than the one before. By 270 AD, the coin that had once been nearly pure silver had become a piece of copper with a thin silver coating on top. Same face, same denomination, almost entirely copper. By that point, the army was already demanding payment in grain instead of coins, because the soldiers understood perfectly well that by the next morning, a silver coin would be worth even less. The Romans were not stupid. They started hiding the old good coins and spending the new bad ones. Prices began rising. Armies increasingly backed whoever paid more. And over about 50 years, more than 20 emperors passed through the empire, while the money started falling apart before the empire did. This was not a random historical episode. It was a pattern, and that pattern would appear again hundreds of years later on the other side of the world. In 11th century China, the problem looked different. There was enough money, but it had become too heavy to carry because copper coins were so dense that moving a large sum sometimes required a cart. So merchants began leaving their coins with trusted middlemen and taking paper receipts instead. And then, since everyone around them trusted the paper, they started accepting the receipts directly, without going back for the coins. And just like that, almost by accident, paper became money. The government noticed, took control of the system, and for a time, everything worked. But printing money turned out to be far easier than mining metal. Prices shot up, and the next dynasty went back to metal. Different continent, different material, same ending. After the First World War, Germany owed more money than it had, and the country began doing the only thing it felt it could do: printing. At first, it did not look frightening, because disasters almost never begin with sirens and explosions. They begin quietly. Prices rise a little, then a little faster. Then people start getting nervous, and then everything suddenly goes insane. By November 1923, a single loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Not million, billion. And people were wheeling money to the shops in barrows, not because they were buying too much, but because the banknotes themselves had become too heavy to carry. A woman left a suitcase full of money on the street for just a few minutes. She came back and found that the suitcase had been stolen, but the money was left behind on the pavement. Because the thief wanted the suitcase, not the contents. When people can no longer understand what their wages will be worth next week, or even tomorrow morning, they lose the sense that the world operates by any rules at all. They start looking for someone who will say, "I will fix everything." And the chaos that followed the hyperinflation was one of the reasons that Hitler came to power a few years later. Because you do not need bombs to destroy a country. After the Second World War, in 1944, 44 countries gathered at a hotel in New Hampshire and tried to build a new system with simple rules. All currencies tied to the dollar tied to gold at $35 per ounce. And for about 25 years, it actually worked. Then the thing that usually happens to large countries that feel like they will always have enough money happened. America started spending. Vietnam, the arms race, social programs. And gradually there were more dollars in the world than gold behind them. Everything continued fairly quietly, right up until France looked at the numbers and asked a very uncomfortable question. Wait, is the gold actually there? Gold began leaving American vaults as countries started exchanging paper for real metal, and the math was starting to look less and less pleasant. On August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon appeared on camera and said the United States was temporarily suspending the exchange of dollars for gold. Only that temporarily has lasted until today, because the window never opened again. And that evening, for the first time in history, the money of the entire planet stopped being tied to anything you could actually hold in your hands. Then came 2008, when banks had spent years doing something quite strange, taking bad mortgage loans, packaging them into attractive financial products labeled safe, and selling them onward, placing bets on them. Then, bets on the bets. And while house prices kept rising, the whole construction looked like genius, right up until the moment it started collapsing. And Lehman Brothers, with 150 years of history, disappeared in a single weekend. That is when people first saw, on a massive scale, what modern money actually is in practice. Central banks did not go digging for gold and did not open secret vaults. They simply entered numbers into computers, created trillions of dollars from nothing, and handed them to the very banks that had helped cause the entire mess, while ordinary people who had lost their homes and jobs sat and watched their savings gradually lose value. And after that, an uncomfortable question got stuck in an enormous number of people's heads. If money can be created with a few keystrokes, then what exactly is it? While most people were only just starting to ask that question, someone was already trying to answer it. On October 31st, 2008, a person, or possibly a group of people, nobody knows to this day, going by the name Satoshi Nakamoto, sent a 9-page document to a group of cryptographers with a rather strange idea. What if you made money without a government, without a bank, without a ruler's face, and without the ability to simply print more? When the first block of the new system appeared in January 2009, hidden inside it was a line from a newspaper. Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. That was not a random phrase. It was a signature on a manifesto. Because the idea was simple. 21 million coins. No exceptions, no printing presses, no situational decisions. For the first time in 10,000 years, someone had tried to create money that could not be quietly diluted. At least, that was the idea. Because power rarely watches calmly as someone takes away its favorite tool. Governments fairly quickly arrived at the conclusion that governments usually arrive at. If money is going digital, then digital money should be ours. Today, central bank digital currencies are being developed by more than 140 countries. And on the surface, everything looks perfectly normal. A digital wallet, fast payments, convenience, no cash. Nothing alarming. But there is one difference. When you hand someone a banknote, nobody knows where it goes next. Digital money works differently because every transaction can be recorded, every transaction can be tracked, every transaction can be stopped. And since these currencies are programmable, they can theoretically carry an expiry date. So money that is not spent in time simply disappears. Or restrictions on certain purchases. Or the ability to freeze a specific account without any court process, without waiting, without warning. And it is important to understand one thing. Nobody officially says they are planning to do any of this. But technically, every one of those functions already exists. And here, the story suddenly returns to where it began. 5,000 years ago, priests in a Mesopotamian temple sat and kept a list of who owed what and who had the right to receive anything. Today, systems are being built where every transaction of every person can be visible in real time. The form has changed. Clay became silver, silver became paper, paper became pixels. But the underlying idea has barely changed at all. Because money was never just money. It was always a ledger, a way of keeping score, and whoever controls the ledger very quickly starts controlling everything else. The thing you carry in your pocket and work for now looks a little different, and there is only one question left, the same one that appeared 5,000 years ago when a priest picked up a tablet and started writing for the first time. Who holds the list? What do you trust more? Gold, Banks, Bitcoin, or something else? Write it in the comments. I am genuinely curious to see how opinions divide. If this changed how you see money, hit like. Subscribe to Nemos.